Something about the Middle East just feels permanent. Not the countries, the leaders, no, not even the actual conflicts themselves. I'm talking about the pattern. Because it seems to me, no matter how many ceasefires are announced, no matter how many negotiations take place, and no matter how many times the words peace talks show up in headlines, it always seems to end the same way. Another escalation, another breakdown, another return to the exact same tension that was supposedly being resolved. It's almost unfortunately predictable. At some point, we can all stop asking when will it end and start asking something perhaps much more uncomfortable. Why doesn't it end at all? Here's the thing most people assume, that the Middle East is unstable because it's too complicated or divided, too historical or too far gone, that peace is just not realistic. But that conclusion falls apart the moment we look a little closer at things. You see, stability in the region isn't purely theoretical. It's already happened. Back in 2015, something really important took place. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or better known as the Iran nuclear deal, that brought together the United States, Iran, and several other world powers under one single agreement.
Today, after 2 years of negotiations, the United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not. A comprehensive long-term deal with Iran that will prevent it from obtaining a nuclear weapon.
Iran agreed to limit its nuclear program. Inspections were put in place, sanctions were lifted in phases, and for a while that agreement was respected. Things didn't escalate. It was beneficial to all parties involved. Oil markets stabilized, tensions eased. The constant threat of direct confrontation between the United States and Iran finally pulled back a bit. At the same time, across the region, the now ever popular Strait of Hormuz remained open. There was no full-scale war between Israel and Lebanon. Of course, proxy conflicts existed, yes, but they were more or less contained. I'm not saying it was perfect, but at least it was stable, and more importantly, it was working. Then in 2018, the whole thing was broken. Why? Well, during the first Trump administration, the United States heavily adopted an America First policy. Under Donald Trump, the United States withdrew from that deal.
The Iran deal is defective at its core. Therefore, I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal.
Sanctions were reimposed, economic pressure returned, trust collapsed almost overnight. Iran responded the only way a sanctioned state typically does, by rebuilding their leverage. Nuclear development resumed. They went back to trying to expand their regional influence. Tensions began rising yet again, and just like that, everything reverted. Back into pressure and escalation, back into something that at this point sadly feels familiar.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה, לא במבצע, לא בסבבים, במלחמה.
So now we are left with a very different question. It's not really why can't peace happen, but more so why does peace keep breaking down even when we know it can work. The thing is, if stability was once possible, then something isn't just preventing it, something is actively undoing it. For us to understand this very unique situation, we have to stop looking at this like a single conflict. This is not just the United States versus Iran. It's not just Israel versus its neighbors at any point. It's a system shaped by three major forces: United States, Israel, and any other non-Western allied states, which in this case happens to be Iran. Each of them with their own goals, each with their own strategies, and each operating at the same time, but never towards the same direction. Let's start with Israel, because one of the biggest misconceptions about the region is that Israel is simply reacting to existential threats. But when we follow follow the timeline closely, that's not the full picture, is it? Under Netanyahu, Israel has consistently taken a very specific geopolitical position that Iran or any other Islamic state for that matter can never be allowed to strengthen politically, economically, or militarily. That position is in hush-hush or behind closed doors. In 2015, Netanyahu went directly to the US Congress to oppose the Iran nuclear deal while it was still being negotiated. He didn't try to voice his opinions quietly or diplomatically. He went public. This was a man on a mission, because from Israel's perspective, that deal didn't solve their problem, it merely delayed it.
Israel does not stand alone. I know that America stands with Israel. I know that you stand with Israel.
Now look at what happens over time. Iranian nuclear scientists are assassinated, senior military figures are targeted, facilities are sabotaged. I mean, come on, these are not random acts. They are precise, timed, and strategic. And in many cases, they occur during periods when diplomacy is either happening or about to happen. At the same time, Israel expanded military operations across the region. Airstrikes in Syria, conflict escalation in Gaza, direct confrontation with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Each action on its own can be justified as state security. But together, the pattern here is obvious. When political actions consistently weaken the opposing side, remove key political figures, increase regional tension, these things don't just affect military balance, they affect diplomacy, timing, and trust. They affect whether negotiations can even happen to begin with. And especially when that pattern repeats often enough, I think it's fair we start asking, is instability only just consequential, or is it part of someone's strategy? Now, if we shift to Iran, from the outside, Iran's behavior often looks intentionally aggressive, and that might be so, but from the inside, from their perspective, it sure looks very different. For decades now, Iran has operated under heavy economic sanctions. That's just facts. Restricted trade, limited access to global finance, and constant external pressure. So when Iran decides to develop its nuclear program, they simply see it as deterrence, the same way Israel sees going directly after any Islamic group it sees as threats as deterrence. When Iran supports groups like Hezbollah, they see it as strategic depth. When it asserts control over regional influence, they see it as state protection. I'm not trying to justify Iranian actions, but it's a simple case of action and reaction. Because in Iran's global position, the logic is simple. If you are surrounded by stronger opposing powers, you don't reduce leverage. That would be stupid. You build on it. Every time pressure increases, that process accelerates. Sanctions would inevitably lead to escalation. Escalation would inevitably lead to more sanctions, and that cycle feeds itself. Then of course there's the United States, which on paper is the actor most interested in stability, and in a lot of ways that's true. The US wants stable oil markets, they want open trade routes and controlled conflict. Yes, controlled conflict. But the way it pursues those goals sometimes creates a contradiction, because at the same time the US is imposing sanctions aggressively, applying military pressure, supports regional allies unconditionally, especially with Israel. So the US ends up in a position where it is trying to reduce conflict while also supporting actions that increase it, trying to stabilize the region while maintaining pressure that destabilizes it. The contradiction would never resolve itself, it only compounds. Okay, hold on. Let's just all step back a bit. We have three actors. One trying to maintain dominance, one trying to secure itself, one trying to manage both. They are all operating at the same time, making moves that make sense individually, but results to conflict collectively. Whenever that happens, the system doesn't stabilize. It would cycle over and over again. Any student of history knows that there's always that moment in almost every conflict cycle that, if enough attention is paid, feels weird. It's usually right when things look like they might stabilize. Peace talks begin, back channels are opened, statements soften ever so slightly, and then boom, something happens that shouldn't. It just so happens to never appear to be strategic or logical, not if the goal is peace anyways. The truth of the matter is, if each side are genuinely trying to de-escalate, then the most valuable thing in that moment is stability, right? Predictability and control. So when a major escalation happens during that window, it stands out. Look at the pattern across multiple cycles. Periods of negotiation between the United States and Iran have repeatedly coincided with sudden spikes in tension elsewhere in the region. These events may not always directly be connected on paper, but still, they are connected in outcome. Take Lebanon, for example. For years, it has functioned as something more than just another neighboring state. It's been a pressure point, a place where influence is projected indirectly. What I'm saying is that it's practically a proxy state at this point, primarily through Hezbollah backed by Iran, and because of that, it becomes a target. When Israel acts in southern Lebanon, it's framed as defense, a response to threats, a necessity even. That's all well and good, but the timing matters. These actions often happen not in isolation, but alongside broader diplomatic movements happening. See, if diplomacy is progressing between the US and Iran, and at the same time conflict intensifies in Lebanon, then two things happen simultaneously. Iran is pulled back into a defensive posture. The conditions for negotiation deteriorate because diplomacy requires stability and escalation absolutely removes it. But unlike Lebanon, the Gaza Strip, though it isn't a proxy battleground in the same way, but it serves a similar function in the region, a place where tensions can escalate rapidly and draw global attention instantly. Even over time, Gaza has followed a pattern of its own. Periods of relative calm, then it's sudden escalation, international pressure, temporary ceasefire, then it's repeat. Every time Gaza escalates, it reshapes the entire regional environment. Diplomatic focus shifts and everyone's positions harden. Public pressure increases and whatever quiet progress might have been happening gets pushed aside. And now is the Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical choke points in the world. Roughly a fifth of global oil supply passes through it. No joke, which means any instability there isn't isolated to the region alone. It becomes a global issue. Iran has repeatedly signaled its ability to control or disrupt that passage, like we can see today. Not necessarily by closing it outright, but by making it uncertain. That uncertainty alone is enough to spike oil prices, disrupt markets, and force international attention. So right now we have, but not limited to, these three separate arenas: Lebanon, Gaza, and the Strait, each with its own dynamics, its own justifications, all connected through one important outcome. They introduce instability at critical times. We should ask ourselves an uncomfortable question. If these escalations consistently happen, especially at moments when stability is most needed, then what are they actually doing? Are they just reactions or are they interventions? Those two things are not necessarily the same thing. Up to this point, it's easy to frame everything as a two-sided struggle. The United States and yet another Islamic state that happens to be Iran this time around. Pressure and resistance, action and reaction, but that model doesn't work when you introduce a third variable: Israel. Because Israel is not operating towards the same endpoint. But how so? Well, let's see. The United States wants controlled stability, managed conflict, predictable outcomes. Okay? Iran wants security, deterrence, autonomy. cool. But Israel, under Netanyahu and the broader strategic doctrine, is pushing something else entirely. Two core objectives have been made increasingly clear. One, to prevent Iran from becoming regionally dominant by any means necessary, which often leads to Netanyahu making bold claims like this.
Iran has never given up its quest for nuclear weapons and the missiles to deliver them.
Nuclear weapons.
Nuclear weapons.
Nuclear weapons. Atomic bombs.
Nuclear weapons is Iraq and Iran.
Uranium for the first bomb.
Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time.
Iran lied. Iran's secret nuclear file.
And two, reshaping the balance of power in neighboring territories, which includes weakening Hezbollah in Lebanon, maintaining pressure on Gaza, disrupting Iranian influence across the entire region. Now, assuming the United States and Iran reach a stable agreement, then Iran stabilizes. Its economy gradually improves. Its influence becomes more predictable. Its position strengthens. But the thing is, from Israel's perspective, this is not an acceptable outcome. This is a threat to its very own power and influence. So now you have a situation where peace between the United States and Iran just doesn't align with Israel's strategic objectives, which means stability itself becomes a problem, not because peace is bad, but because what peace enables now conflicts with their long-term goals. So let's go back to the pattern we've been seeing. Talks begin, escalations happen, talks collapse. Seen one way, that looks like failure, doesn't it? Seen another way, it looks like calculated and intentional interference. And that right there is the uncomfortable reality of things. Because at this point, we are no longer looking at missed opportunities. No. We are looking at competing objectives, where one actor's version of peace is another actor's version of risk. So the question as to why the region doesn't just stabilize is not because it's completely broken, but because it's functioning exactly as it's being driven. Three actors, three different end goals, all interacting in the same hot space. So every time those goals begin to align, even if it's temporarily, something eventually pulls them apart again. When I started asking myself, and I'm sure you have at some point, why does the Middle East never stabilize? The answer isn't because peace is impossible in the region. No, it's because stability requires alignment, and said alignment requires compromise. And right now, none of the major actors are willing to compromise on the things that matter most to them, not even a little. Which means what we are seeing isn't a series of random conflicts. It's a system under constant tension. A system where security creates escalation, escalation disrupts diplomacy, diplomacy threatens strategy, and strategy necessitates security over and over again. So, if it always seems like things are about to settle but never really do, that's not merely an accident. It's what it looks like when stability can exist but no one agrees on what it should look like.